Hey friends, Tony here of TL Yarn Crafts, and welcome to this tutorial for the Honeycomb Tunisian Ear Warmer. If you're clicking over from any of my other Tunisian videos, welcome. If you just happen to stumble upon this, I'm so glad to have you here. I have lots of other videos related to Tunisian crochet, including an absolute beginner's guide to Tunisian crochet available via the link in the description. If you are fairly new to Tunisian crochet, I encourage you to start there. If you're not new, you'll still be able to follow along, but you'll have a greater grasp of Tunisian if you start with one of those videos. So to make our Honeycomb Tunisian Ear Warmer, you're going to want an 8mm crochet hook. I'm just using a regular hook here. Our project is short enough that we won't need a longer Tunisian crochet hook. You'll also want a pair of scissors, a darning needle, and 2 buttons. These are 1.5-inch buttons. And then you're going to want 2 colors of Aran weight yarn. So I used We Are Knitters, the Petite Wool. This is just something that I had kind of laying around in my stash. So this works perfectly. This is an Aran weight yarn, and that basically means that it falls right between a worsted weight and a bulky weight. So I have adjustments for working this project in worsted and bulky weight available on my blog via the link down in the description. Before we jump in, I would absolutely love it if you would take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. That way I'll know to make even more video tutorials for you guys. All right, friends, let's grab our materials and jump right in. We'll start our ear warmer with our A color. I have this nice sandy brown to get started with. And I'm going to make a slip knot and place that on my hook. So insert that and tighten it down. And to get things started, I am going to chain 12. So yarn over and pull through. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now I'm going to flip my chain over and I'm going to pull up a loop in the second chain for my hook and each one across, and I'll end up with 12 loops on my hook. So I'm going to pull up a loop in the back bump, which is right here, yarn over and pull up that loop. Insert under the back bump, yarn over and pull up. I'm going to do that for each chain across. All right, just one more here and pull up that loop. So if I count across, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 loops. All right, and now I want to work those loops off of my hook. So I'm going to start with a chain 1, so yarn over and just pull through the first loop. And now I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2 all the way back. And that's how I'll work my loops off of my hook and complete my foundation. So yarn over, pull through 2 until there's only 1 loop left on the hook. Yarn over and pull through 2, and now I've got my 1 loop. So this is my foundation. So for row 1 of my honeycomb pattern, I'm going to Tunisian simple stitch the next stitch and then Tunisian purl stitch the following stitch. So this loop on our hook counts as our first stitch. So we're actually going to skip this first vertical bar, and I'm going to Tunisian simple stitch in the next vertical bar. So just insert my hook behind that bar, yarn over and pull up the loop. And now I'm going to purl stitch this next stitch. So I'm going to bring my yarn in front, insert behind that bar, bring my yarn behind my hook, yarn over and pull up the loop. And I'm going to repeat that across my row. So Tunisian simple stitch my next stitch, going behind that bar, yarn over and pull up the loop, Tunisian purl stitch the following stitch, bringing the yarn to the front, inserting behind that bar, yarn around into the back, yarn over my hook, and pull through. Tunisian simple stitch the next stitch, and I'm going to purl the next stitch. So here's my trick for making sure that my purl stitches are easy. After I pull that loop up and yarn behind, I'm actually going to kind of grab that yarn right at the base here and kind of pull it away from my hook. So when I yarn over, it's really easy and fluid for my stitch to go back through. So yarn to the front, inserting, yarn to the back. I'm holding on to that knot, yarning over and pulling through. Simple the next stitch and purl the following stitch. For this project, every time we get to this last stitch, which is right here, we're always going to work under both loops of that last stitch. So as I turn, you can see here I've got 2 loops. There's 1 and there's 2, and I want to work under both of those. So I'm going to insert my hook under both of those loops, yarn over, and pull up a loop. I always want to make sure that I work that last stitch with a fairly loose gauge, just so that my project doesn't tighten down on me on that left side. And now we're ready to start our return pass. So we're going to start by chaining 1, yarn over and pull through 2, and we're going to do this until there are 2 loops left on our hook, because then we're going to want to change color. So yarn over, pull through 2 until there's 2 loops left. There we go. So we've got 2 loops here. So I want to drop my A color, but I'm not going to cut it. I'm just going to move it out of the way. And I'm going to grab my B color, which is this pretty kind of red velvet color. It's so gorgeous. Okay. Yarn over your hook, and we're going to pull that through those last 2 loops. And just like that, we've changed our color and we're ready to work with our B color. So for the honeycomb pattern, we want to actually offset our stitches. So in the previous row, we started with a Tunisian simple stitch. So we'll want to start this row with a purl stitch. So we're going to bring the yarn in front, insert under, yarn behind, yarn over, and pull through. And then a simple stitch in the next stitch. If you're ever having trouble figuring out where you are, you'll note that the Tunisian purl stitches, just like knitting, have this little bump in front of them. So we'll call that the purl bump. So we know that our purl stitches have a purl bump in them, and we have to do a simple stitch in those. And our Tunisian simple stitches just have a bar in front of them, and we'll have to do a purl stitch in those. So we're ready for a purl stitch. So yarn in front, behind, and pull through. And this is a purl stitch, so we're going to simple that stitch, purl the next, and simple the next. And we're going to repeat that across the row. Purl this stitch, and we'll end that with a simple stitch, and then work our final stitch, remembering to kind of rotate the work towards you and work under both loops of that final stitch. Yarn over and pull up that loop. Keep that stitch fairly loose, just so you don't have any tension issues. Yarn over, pull up 1, and do your return pass. Yarn over, pull through 2, through 2, through 2, through 2, and through 2. For this project, we do 2 rows in each color. So that was the first color in my B, in my color B. I mean, that was the first row in my B color, sorry. So next we need to do another row in this B color. So this row started with a purl stitch. We can see that purl bump there. So now we need to do a simple stitch in there. So simple and purl the next stitch. And purl that stitch. Simple in the next, purl in the next. Absolutely love the honeycomb stitch because it's fairly simple, but it just makes an absolutely gorgeous fabric. And we're just going to repeat this across. We've got a purl stitch going here, and then we're ready to work our very last stitch, rotating towards us, making sure we work under both loops of that last stitch. Pull up, leaving it a little bit slack just to make sure we compensate for the tension. Yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And remember, we'll want to change our color. So we're going to pull back until there are only 2 loops left on our hook. So here we have our 2. So I'm going to drop my B color, and I'm going to grab my A color again. Bring that so it's close to me. I'm going to grab my A color, and I usually, when I'm changing colors, I will bring my new color towards the outside of my work around my old color. So this is the color I dropped, and I'm going to bring that color around and up. And I'm going to pull through, and I make sure I keep my tension nice and loose there so I don't have any tension issues. So now, again, if I look at this stitch here, this has a bar in front of it, so I need to purl that stitch. And I'll put a simple stitch in the next stitch. Purl and simple. For an adult size of our ear warmer, we're going to want to repeat these rows until our ear warmer measures about 19 inches. And then finish up making sure that you've completed your 2 rows in your B color. So I'm going to keep working on that. And then join me back here once you've completed that, and we'll move on to the next rows of our ear warmer. So I've continued my work here. This was where I started, and I just continued working up, and I ended, I have 1 more row of color B, and you'll want to end when your project is about 19 inches, and you want to end with your B color. So we're going to do this last row of the honeycomb stitch here. So this was a purl stitch, so I need to do a simple stitch there, and then purl my next stitch, simple and purl, simple and purl, all the way across, just alternating like we've been doing before. Now I've got my last stitch working under both loops, pulling that loop up, chain 1, pull through 2 until there are 2 loops left, and then I'm going to cut my yarn and change color. So pulling through 2. All right, I've got 2 loops left. I'm going to pull up my A color and change color, and then I'm going to cut my B color. I want to leave a nice long length of thread of yarn here because I'm going to use that to do some sewing later. So I am done with color B for now. And with my A color, now I want to do kind of the flap of my ear warmer. So if we look at the original sample, we're like right here. So now we need to do this section that's underneath the buttons. And I just did that section in regular Tunisian simple stitch with my A color. So I've got my A color here, and I'm just going to pull up loops for simple stitch. So working under each loop, regardless of whether it's a simple stitch or a purl stitch, I'm just pulling up each loop. So I'll end up with 12 loops again, like I have before. And you'll want to do this flap and make it as long as you need it to be to comfortably fit your buttons in there. So I've got 1.5 inch buttons. So I'm going to do 5 rows of simple stitch. So with our simple stitch, we just did our simple stitch straight across, worked our last stitch as normal, chained 1, and now this is the return pass. And I'm going to do all 5 of my rows in this color. So again, I'm pulling up loops in each stitch across. There's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Pulling up a loop under both loops of my last stitch, chain 1, and pull through 2. I'm going to keep working until I have 5 total rows of my simple stitch. Work on that as well for whatever length you need it to be for your buttons, and then we'll come back and move on to the next steps of our ear warmer. Here I'm just finishing up my Tunisian simple stitch row. I did my 5th row. Now I'm going to do my return pass back, yarning over and pulling through 2. There we go. And now I want to do a slip stitch bind off. For my slip stitch bind off, I'm going to insert into the next loop, pull up, and pull through the loop that's on my hook as well. So insert, yarn over, pull through both loops. And I'm going to do that all the way across. So insert, yarn over, pull through both. Insert, yarn over, pull through both. All the way across my row. And in my last stitch. And at this point, I am not going to bind off. I'm going to continue on. I'm going to start by chaining 1, and I'm going to rotate to work along the sides of my work here. So what's nice about Tunisian crochet is that you get these really pretty V's on the ends that honestly look like the top of single crochet stitches. So that's what we're going to work into. So I'm going to single crochet into each of these stitches. So working under both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 for each row end. So easy. And just continuing on with the same hook, which is nice that we use just a regular crochet hook because it does double duty for us. So I'm going to continue on single crocheting down this end. When I get to the corner here, I'm going to chain 1, rotate, and I'm going to single crochet across this end. So you should have 12 single crochets here, and then single crochet, chain 1 in this corner and single crochet across that end. And you're going to stop when you get back to the beginning of what was your row here at the end of your Tunisian simple stitch rows that you did. So just single crochet around those 3 sides of your ear warmer and meet me back here when you're done with that. So I've completed all of my single crochets around my entire ear warmer, and I've made it back to my bind off row. So now I want to leave a nice long tail, but I'm going to snip my working yarn now. There we go. Alrighty, so I'm going to pull that loop up and out of my work, and now we need to do some seaming to finish things off. So if you remember, we've got a long tail from the last row of our color, our B color. So what I'm going to do is actually weave in these other 2 ends. I'm going to take care of that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so that's all done. I just took those ends and kind of weaved them under some of the bumps here, and then this end I wove it under the back of these single crochet stitches. So now I want to grab my darning needle and pick up my B color that was from this row here where I cut it. I'm going to thread that onto my darning needle, and I'm actually going to sew my cast on edge, my foundation edge, onto the back of the loops here of this row. So I'm going to just grab my color and kind of bring it to where this foundation row meets this row here on the back, and I'm just going to whip stitch. So under a stitch here and under a stitch here. And this is actually going to be like the circumference of my ear warmer. So I'm just going to pull that snug and go under both loops of my foundation and pick up a loop on that row and just whip stitch that all the way across. And then I'm just going to weave this end in, and then we'll be able to cut this color. There we go. So we're done with that. We can get rid of this. Now we're going to flip everything so that the right side is out. I'm just kind of finessing this so it'll lay flat on the back there. And now we've got this kind of front flap that we left here of our Tunisian simple stitch rows. So now I'm going to put that length of yarn onto my darning needle, and I'm going to kind of get that length of yarn to the back of my work, and I'm going to thread it over to where the flap meets the other side of the ear warmer, because then we're going to sew down the flap as well. You just want to be careful if you're working with a yarn like this, because single ply yarn can split on you if you're too rough with it. So I'm going to bring my yarn through, and I'm just going to lay that flat till it just kind of lays comfortably. It's not like any specific amount that you want it to pull over. You just want it to lay flat here. So I'm going to insert through the stitch on the bottom and insert through a stitch on the top, just whatever stitch is right on top of it. And then I'm going to go through the next stitch and pull up the next stitch on the bottom. And I just want my simple stitch rows to lay flat, because that's where I'm going to add my buttons. So the buttons on this project are not actually functional. They're just pretty. They're just there to be pretty. Right onto the ear warmer. So now my flap is curving, so I'm going to pick up stitches along the ear warmer here to sew down the rest of my flap. All right, that feels good. Our flap is nice and secure. That's not going anywhere. So since my yarn is already on the back of my work, I'm just going to weave it under some stitches here. Pull that through gently and cut that end. All right, the very last thing that we need to do is sew on some buttons. So I have some 1.5 inch buttons here. You'll want to make sure, of course, that the darning needle that you have can go through the eye of those buttons. It goes through pretty easily for mine because my buttons are so large. And then you'll just want to kind of line up your buttons and decide how you want the holes to go. On my previous one, I had my holes going sideways. So maybe we'll switch it up on this one and we'll have our holes going up and down. So I like to sew on with a light color of my ear flap. So I'm just going to grab 2 long lengths of yarn from my ball here. Thread that onto my needle. And again, just kind of line these up, figure out where they're going to go so that they're even. So that one, that's got a good spot there. So I'm just going through both thicknesses of my fabric here on my ear warmer, up one hole, make sure I leave a long enough tail to tie it in the back, and then through the second. And I like to go through at least twice, sometimes 3 times, depending on the size of the button. So I'm going to go back through and through, and I've got plenty of yarn here, so I'm going to go through once more, make sure that's nice and full, good and secure, that's not going anywhere, and pull that through. And then I'll do the same for the second button. I'll tie a knot on the back weave in the ends, and then my Honeycomb Tunisian Ear Warmer will be all done. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button so I'll know to make more of these videos, and drop a comment and let me know what colors and what yarn you would use for your project. For even more free patterns, you can find me on tlycblog.com and on Instagram at instagram.com/tlyarncrafts. Thanks you guys, and I'll see you next time.